sung short. It's the Purple Rock Survivor Podcast.
Welcome to the Purple Rock Survivor Podcast. I am John. My co-host is Andy. And this week we are talking Survivor 42, episode 12. I am Survivor confident in that. I didn't even check, but I'm feeling pretty good. This is episode 12. Andy,
Blindside, this is 13.
Ah, shit. No,
Okay. No, you got
I
it.
hate the real-time fact-checking. Anyway, so we should dive right in because there's a lot to talk about this week, which is good. We've been waiting for that. So let's start where we always do. How'd you like this episode, Andy?
So I did not like this episode in the ways that, you express enjoyment for things, that was an enjoyable experience. That was not for me. In fact, in the evening in general was not particularly fun for me. I came from watching my nominally favorite hockey team surrender 9 goals, which for some that's like a series. That was a game. And then I turned around and watched, and to keep it Canadian, my guy Omar leaving. So I did not like it, but I will say that I think it was a good episode of Survivor. How about yourself?
Yeah, it was a big Lanada night, just leading with the L's. I mean, see, if I was going to be devastated by a player leaving, it was more last week than this. So for me, this was like, hell yeah, this was exciting. I mean, obviously, I've very much enjoyed watching Omar's schemes here, but over the past 3 episodes, we've somehow lost Hai, Drea, and Omar, which is just a brutal stretch. And yet, I came away from this episode excited for the finale. That's a good sign, I think.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not going to complain. One I often don't like is when you have strings like that, or like when the player I'm most interested is taken out, either at this point in the game or maybe the finale early or something. It's often doesn't feel as good because it's not like they were epically outmaneuvered or anything. It's often just, the remaining players are like, that person is so much better than we are. And we have numbers, that I find less enjoyment. And that's not what is happening tonight. He was taken out with some pretty great maneuvering. So again, I think it was a strong episode of Survivor. I just wish it hadn't happened.
Yeah. I mean, I don't think this season is going to give us an all-timer of a winner. Like Omar potentially could have been that, depending on how he stuck the landing.
I mean, if he had performed better in this episode, right, for instance.
But I mean, there's still potential for a very good win and a very good season finale here. So that's what I'm saying.
Yeah, I think there's very small potential, hardly even a potential for a winner that I'd be disappointed in at this point. So that's good. Just, I had my fave, and I thought he was doing well.
Yeah.
And also, here's another part why I didn't enjoy the episode that I think was a strong episode of Survivor. I spent the whole time watching it being like, well, I was wrong about everything. And that's the worst thing. I don't like that. That's not what I want. And I honestly figured that I was going to have to come on here and do what people always frequently hope to hear, but rarely actually get the opportunity. It's just for me to talk about how wrong I was. And then by the time I'm getting ready to go to bed, which I was tired. It was probably only about 10 minutes after the episode. I was already formulating ways. And no, I was not wrong, in fact.
That's right. You just got to dig in deeper.
And then more news came out today that suggested that I might not have been as wrong. But while I was watching it, I certainly was like, well, wrong about that, wrong about that, yeah. Wrong about that.
It was not stellar for our assessment of the game as of last week's episode, until we got a little bit of information that we'll discuss later in this episode. But for now, we'll just discuss the on-screen stuff that we saw. And the, first thing to bring up is the fact that Omar could have been safe, right? Lindsay
what the hell?
Had an expiring idol. There's nothing she can do with it. She cannot play it at 5. It's done at 6. It just becomes a trinket. And she said,
one you can't even keep, because apparently production keeps them now in case they want to, do another Island of the, or whatever the stupid season was, or the Ghost Island. I
sure.
believe, yeah.
Yeah, you definitely want to revisit that because, that season was...
Absolutely.
Chef's kiss.
The highlight probably was the fucking stick.
Exactly. Anyway, so...
No, the highlight was Chris Noble.
Oh, good point.
Yeah.
Missed that
Sorry,
guy.
fact check. Okay, continue.
Yeah, that's good. That was a worthy fact check, though. So Lindsay, of course, does not play this expiring idol on what seemed to be, at least in this episode, her closest ally. How'd you feel about that one?
The moment and we're not going to play my idol so it doesn't go in circulation went out of her mouth. I was just like, oh, because honestly, like the whole episode is designed around the maneuvering happening to get rid of Omar, sorry. And then to the point where I'm like, they're going too early on this. It's going to turn around. That's not always the case. So it's like, well, or they're telling the story of how the player they'd built up so much, this is the downfall. But then I'm like, but no. There's the idol. Even Mike knows it. Like, he's expecting it.
Yep.
And then she says that, and I'm like, what? What in the hell? What are you talking about? And in that moment, my hopes drain and my respect for Lindsay out the door.
I mean, just play her given explanation out, right? Like, she's concerned that if she plays this amulet that became an idol, thus a new idol would be inserted back into the game. But again, idols will be done at Final 5, right? So she's worried that an idol will come in for only the next vote. And she's saying this having just won an immunity challenge, right? So her thought is, I won this challenge. I'm going to take out Jonathan, who is the biggest impediment to me winning the next challenge. And I'm then somehow concerned about an idol. Like, yeah? What? Why is that your fixation?
Like, here's the thing. Even if it was a normal idol, that's stupid reason not to play an idol.
Yes.
It's like, oh, no, you're safe. And so the biggest takeaway I had coming from it is just like, these two people are not demonstrating the appropriate level of respect and fear for this upcoming tribal council. And that is a common mistake in Survivor. And obviously at this point, it's because I know people are coming for Omar, so I feel it even more. But it's just like, don't do that. Don't think that far ahead. Yes, it could be bad if it goes back. You need to survive now. Win this one. Deal with tomorrow. Every tribal council that you do not have an immunity around your neck, and which maybe that's why she's a little loosey-goosey and comfortable with it, you should fear that it could happen, especially when the options are so small. How can you feel that secure in the penultimate vote of the season? Frankly, the second to last time when you can vote somebody out. No, and then her reasoning. No, this is not an idol. This is an idol that expires tonight. So why would you think that it would be put back? And even if you think, hey, it's an idol now, of course, an idol that expires today, but if I play it, they could put it back. How is you're not playing it preventing that? You are no longer in possession of this thing as of tonight. So if they wanted to rehide an idol, you're not playing it isn't changing anything about that.
Also, there is still the possibility that even if that did happen, you could find it if that's what you're concerned with. I
guess maybe in that case she hasn't found any yet. Like this one was, she ran into a challenge for it, But okay, so there was a what I would call half-assed theory that she could not transfer the amulet because I guess the original note said something about it being non-transferable or some such. Correct. The amulet itself is non-transferable.
Sure.
Yes.
That does not mean that you can't play it on someone else, right? Like if it's now an idol, with all idols, you could play them on someone else. So
yeah, and no, you continue. Sorry.
So okay, even in the worst case, say that they're like, no, you absolutely cannot do that. She has an immunity necklace. She can then give him the immunity necklace and play the idol on herself. There were 0 scenarios where she could not have kept him immune.
Yeah, and yes. So if it was non-transferable, but and Omar has talked about this in his exits, that in order to play it for him, in order to overcome that, and they were both under the impression that she could absolutely play it for him, as am I. It's either an idol or it isn't. she would have to publicly do so. She couldn't have handed it to him in camp and then have him just play it. Two things. One, okay, then just publicly do it.
Fine.
At least one other person is already aware that you have it. So this isn't news. Two, why would you want Omar to play it for himself? Why would you want him to have that credit? You want to do that. Frankly, a rule of thumb always, actually, I guess not always, because now there's the whole you can steal somebody's idol bit. But before that is that you play your idol for whomever you want. Once Russell Hands did that, because you hand it over to them, now it's their move. You play it, and it's your move. So yeah, we didn't want to be public. Again, it's Final 5! You guys are being way too cute here.
So, at this point, it seems pretty obvious to us, right? That she definitely could have saved Omar if she wanted to. So, is it possible that she just thought it might be better for herself if, maybe she wasn't actively rooting to lose Omar, but maybe she was okay with it if it happened?
It's certainly possible, especially what else we're going to talk about and what the show has decided to hide from us.
Yeah.
All I can talk about right now is her stated goals, which were to eliminate Jonathan and to not eliminate Omar. Again, if it comes out, it's like, actually, yeah, I didn't care if Omar went. I wasn't going to go out of the way with it. Then I'd be like, perfect. Okay, you shouldn't. Like, removing Omar from the game has value to Lindsay. I think this isn't the ideal time given what her other objectives are. But, just last week, and I don't know if we should reference the things that we said in terms of arguments, because we were wrong about so many things. But just last week, we both concluded that it was most likely that Omar would beat her in the final scenario. So again, in that scenario, yeah, okay, it's fine. But all we have to go on is her stated intentions was that's not what she wanted to do. At Tribal Council, when it goes down, she seems upset by it. So whether it ends up being a good thing or not for her is like, I don't think that comes into play. I think she just screwed this up, and I think both of them were just too casual with the possible consequences that they were facing.
Yeah, and I think ultimately it probably is better for her that she lost Omar here. But that's from a viewer's perspective. Like, on the island, I don't think she could have known that.
Yeah, I think on the island, her read, and I guess we'll talk about this more later, that it would have been better for her this time for Jonathan to be gone instead of Omar. And then I think she would have had other shots to get rid of Omar. So, whereas the reverse might not be true.
Right. And we'll get into Lindsay's rationale later. But for now, let's shift to the other big play.
So yeah, that's the big fuck up that was there highlighted. Yeah. And now I guess we should talk about the person who, capitalized on it.
Let's flip it up here and talk about the actual solid move, like the truly impressive maneuvering of Maryanne. Like, as this is happening, I'm like, huh. And I actually flashed back to, like, remember, I think it was right at the merge episode. She's talking with Tori, walking along the beach, and she talks about how, Drea being a threat is a useful thing later on. And there's this pause from Tori, like, oh shit, like, wait, you're a player. And it's like, I had almost that same thing. Like, I've seen growth in Maryanne over the past couple episodes, but then, like, right there, I'm like, oh shit, she has shifted, man. She went from that, like, happy-go-lucky, like, I'm so stoked to be out here person to now she's like gamer face Maryanne. She's like ready to play now. And I think, again, not to reference stuff that we said last week because it wasn't all great, but I think we said that she has to be pretty active over these next few votes if she wants to win. And this was certainly the start to that.
Yeah, I mean, last week I said there's a path as long as she does some stuff.
Right.
And the path is looking pretty strong now. I think actually the show has done a really good job in the second half of the season, just seeding little elements of, Maryanne is no Rube. You might, assume that because she's happy, and that is a thing that we often do in society. We assume people that are more happy-go-lucky and more carefree or whatever, or at least presenting, are less intelligent than, cynical, awful people like ourselves. But the show, I think, through many different episodes, it's just put little stuff in there. I think the Tori one was a big highlight. And I do believe we've talked about it in many podcasts, just as a little note, like, oh yeah, that was actually a pretty smart read by Maryanne. at the tribal council where she and Drea talked about, the different impacts of race and how that's shaping her game. Maryanne made a lot of good observations in the following ones. So now that we're here and she makes the biggest impact move of the game thus far, it's like, oh, it's actually not coming out of nowhere. It just wasn't, pushed to the forefront until it became plot relevant. And yeah, I'm not, again, I really liked what Omar had been doing. I would have really liked if he was able to see it all the way to the finish line. But now, friendship with Omar ended. Maryanne's my best friend. That's my new rooting interest. And it follows two very easy patterns for me. First is I'm a front runner.
Yep.
And I cheer for competence. She just did the best thing. That's what excites me about Survivor. So now it's like, she's got the juice, right? And of course, she's also Canadian, so it's easy that way. Both events last night, my Canadian rooting interest was, stomped out and humiliated by another Canadian. So it's like, what can you do?
It rises from the ashes. Also, we talked about her path. She has an idol that no one knows about going into next week, which again makes her path look really good here.
Yeah, she's guaranteed Final Four. Because I'm pretty confident she'll play it. Yeah. Unlike Lindsay with Omar, I'm pretty confident that she'll play it. I mean, she made sure to play her extra vote in the last time that she could play that.
Again, smart. Like, really impressed here. Like, she's doing the things you should do, the things that make the most sense. And like, we'll get into a little bit more later how she sold this plan or came about with this plan. Like, really impressed. Like, this was so good. And like I said, I think to me, it seems like an evolution of Maryanne. It's true. Like, there has been some seeds of this stuff there, and she couldn't always do these things because she didn't quite have the alliance that she would have needed to do so. Now that the numbers are small, you don't really need much of an alliance. You need people with similar voting interests. And in this case, you needed person with similar voting interests, which was not that hard to do. So, I mean, I'm really liking her odds going into next week because I think not only does she have her idol, she seemed to develop a relationship with Mike, who does seem like the type that would play an idol on her, right? Like,
no, that's a lie. He just voted out Omar. Listen, come on, I'm not believing that for a second.
He seems like the type that would. I'm not saying he's going to, but at the very least, she's got like things going for her that she didn't seem to have a couple episodes ago. And as you said, there's 0% chance that she doesn't play the idol and keep herself safe. I think it's a matter of if she will play it in a way that not only benefits her, but like coordinates the vote so that it is doubly effective. Like, it saves her, but then also takes out her target instead of someone else's. Like, then you're talking about like strong march to the final tribal council.
Yeah, I guess the only chance that she's not playing an idol for herself is if she wins immunity.
Right.
In which case, I could see her playing it on Romeo, So, like, I have full confidence now, full Survivor confidence that she is going to go forward doing things well. I haven't felt this strong about somebody since last week.
Right. It's been so long.
And look, of the many things we were wrong about last week, one was, and I think the big discussion point was, how much damage did Drea's outgoing words do to Omar? I still contend, not nearly as much as people think, but maybe a little more than I thought, which was nothing. Because I think that actually was kind of the light bulb moment for Maryanne, at least. And look what happened, right? So yeah, and I guess another thing we were wrong about is, hey, who's even going to execute a move against Omar anyway? Nobody's talking to each other. Apparently, it doesn't take much. All it took was the interests of Maryanne, Mike, Jonathan, and Romeo to align in that moment, and boom, it was like that. And good for her for seizing on it. She had her original plan. And then when that wasn't going to go very well, she came up with the plurality vote. So full marks. And if I had to pick a favorite, I wouldn't do that to her. That would be unfortunate. She doesn't need that kind
Please
of
don't put that hex on her. No. Yeah, we kind of suggested last week that it seemed unlikely that you'd get anybody moving on Omar. But of course, right at the start of the episode, we get exactly what we had predicted last week, right? Like, Omar's giving the idol back to Mike. And Mike's like, oh, thank you so much. You really saved me back there. And get the confessional from Omar. Like, this is exactly what I wanted. Like, Mike is indebted to me now. I'm in such a good position. Like, Mike even told me the idol is ours now. Like, we're shared, blah, blah, blah. And then almost immediately, we see Mike like, okay, we're talking to Maryanne, like, we got to get this Omar guy out. Like, whoa, shit. On a dime.
So we're getting to the part where it is, and I have this lower down, but now that we're talking about it, it's kind of tough not to reference the information that came out today.
It is.
Because my thought while watching it is, wow, so this whole thing with Mike about being, loyal and all that, that is just an effective act. Like, he is here for himself. He's finding, the moments. I was dead wrong about Drea, and he's playing the role that everybody wants him to play, but really he'll cut anybody at any time. But it actually turns out there was more to it than that, possibly. So one thing I just do before we talk about that, just for Mike, he's not going to get the credit that Maryanne richly deserves for what happened, but at least as presented, her turning on Omar in the first place was all because of Mike. So, like, while he didn't cast the votes to get rid of him, and we'll talk about that really soon, this was also his move, like, to flip the game and get rid of Omar. Like, I don't know if Maryanne does that without Mike approaching her.
And yet, as soon as Mike convinces her to do this plan, later on, essentially tries to back out of it. Like, gets scared. So,
but for good reason.
Sure.
Like, he's being presented as this obstinate, like, doofus, him and Jonathan. But that's, like, really nice for Maryanne to feel that way when her neck isn't on the line.
Yep.
Like, his worry is that the idol he knows damn well about will be played, and that would remove Jonathan, a player who was useful to him, or possibly endanger himself if that's where the vote was going, and talk was going both ways. And he doesn't want to play his idol in this instance. Also, there's another thing out there that we'll get to really soon now.
All right.
So it's like if Lindsay had played the idol for Omar, I think Maryanne's plan fails completely. And again, for her, it's like, oh, well, I took my shot. It was a free shot.
Yep.
But like, even like the split vote, like, I don't think the 2 votes for Romeo would have carried the day, because now Romeo doesn't get to vote and Jonathan doesn't get to vote. So then it would just be Mike and Maryanne versus Lindsay and Omar.
You're forgetting Maryanne's extra vote here.
Oh, yeah, and I guess that vote does carry forward. There you go.
So they would have been fine. But the point is, like, Mike and Jonathan are like...
But only because they put votes on Romeo, though. Her original plan didn't have that, I don't believe.
Right. But of course, Mike and Jonathan are like, oof, this is getting too hot. Like, let's just play it safe. We'll get rid of Romeo. I mean, ultimately, to Maryanne's credit, she modifies that plan and she's like, all right, fine. We can decoy on Romeo. And, Romeo essentially has no agency here. He has to do something, right? He's got to, like, go along with somebody. And so Maryanne's like, I'll keep you safe, basically. Vote with me. And he's like, yeah, sure. Because what else is he going to do? And ultimately, she arrives at the right conclusion, which is that if she just does a plurality vote, she'll win. And then the guys are also protected in a way that they want to be, right? So she can essentially do her plan without them using that extra vote. And man, they were awfully quick to dismiss her, though, despite having totally reasonable objections to the plan. Did seem mildly condescending how quickly they dismissed her.
Yeah, so I think that's the bigger issue. I think they were right, and I think their objections were right, and they had greater risk, and I think there's actually great value in just voting out a player like Romeo, and we'll talk about that a bit later. But I think her frustration is probably even less about them not listening to her plan, and more that they'll never listen to her.
Yep.
And it's just, that's how it's been all season. So that, in that part, yeah, they should have listened to her, but they also weren't wrong that they needed to put some votes elsewhere. Otherwise, Jonathan in this instance would have gone home.
All right, so let's get to the important data dump here that we're dancing around.
We've been dancing around.
So we saw in this episode, right? Like we saw the perspective that on screen, Mike is indebted to Omar for being saved, just like we thought. Quickly switches on a dime. And we're like, wow, I can't believe that happened so suddenly. And yet, in Exit Press, Omar reveals a detail which makes it make a whole lot more sense, right? It doesn't make it seem like this sudden thing where Mike was just like, oh, wait, I've realized in the past 5 minutes that Omar's a threat now, having saved me. There was actually some more detail behind that. Do you want to share that with the crowd?
Yeah, and like this also gets like the big thing that I felt wrong about. It's like, wow, I really guess that he should have voted out Mike and kept that idol. But no, like, so we almost always say, exit interviews aren't canon. Let's take them with a large grain of salt. However, in this particular thing, there was visual evidence provided. So either it is true or Omar decided to put on an elaborate hoax that can be immediately dismissed in like 1 week's time. Apparently Omar had an idol nullifier since pre-merge. And for him, in his thoughts, that is the entire reason why he went home this time. He screwed that up. He was so focused on executing that plan, and that's why people turned on him. So yeah, giving Mike back the idol was not a big deal because he was just going to nullify it. So he didn't care. But what happens is Jonathan, who was there when Omar got the nullifier, they basically both saw it, and Omar was the first to touch it. So it was his. They kept the secret the whole time. In the negotiations of who to get rid of last week, Drea or Mike, Omar lets Lindsay in on the fact that he has a nullifier. So now she has that knowledge. Jonathan gets wind that this shared secret is now shared with Lindsay as well, which is why you get that confessional at the beginning of this episode where he's like, oh, we're not actually all that close together, and I can tell that they have this relationship. That's why. That suddenly he realizes that Lindsay and Omar are far closer to each other, and that Omar he's not Omar's number one. It's probably Lindsay because of that shared information. He goes to Mike with that information, and that's why Mike turns on him, because it's like, this guy is just going to nullify my idol. He's not saving me at all. So all of it turns on this entirely hidden thing that the show didn't, completely cut out of the narrative, and it's just like, well, then how wrong was I? Like, I don't think it was Drea. I think it was this nullifier thing, or at least not for, Mike and Jonathan. It wasn't. A lot of the decision making, all that. It's like, I didn't know we had this thing.
Yeah, I'll say it certainly makes Mike's actions make a lot more sense, right? The fact that he goes from like, oh, buddy, thank you so much. Like, you saved me back there, to like, we got to get you out. And it's almost jarring how fast the switch is, right? But if you know that a conversation took place where Jonathan was like, yeah, he gave you your idol back because he wants to have the big move of you playing your idol and him nullifying it and taking you out. And then, Mike, who seems to just easily believe anything people tell him because, he was told about a knowledge of his power advantage and believed it despite it never existing before. And he's believing Jonathan that, Omar has this nullifier, which has existed before at least. So, yeah, if in that scenario, he's like, oh, I'm actually being lied to, then yes, it makes more sense that he's suddenly going to be like, no, Omar needs to get out of here because that guy's actually not loyal to me. He's just going to clown me.
Yeah, and like his fear about what, Maryanne's original plan. And now that Omar will in his mind, probably be immune as well. Makes sense, even though he has an idol, because it's like, that idol is not going to be any good to me. If he nullifies it tonight, it makes sense why he wants to hold on to it for 5, because maybe, Omar wastes his nullifier. Like, there's so much going on. And look, I get that the show edits things out if they don't think it matters to the narrative. I understand everything we talk about is based on a flawed view of reality. We've accepted that, and frankly, usually it's just like all we can talk about is what's on the TV. I'm sure every move there's this other thing, but the narrative constructed. But it's like, why this? Because there seems to be a ready available narrative about it. And one of the reasons why I'm, quick to believe Omar, besides the fact that like he shows the note for the nullifier in his video interviews, today, is that he's not defending himself. He's that the reason I went out is because I screwed up this nullifier thing, not because I didn't screw up at all. And, generally when they're willing to admit fault is when I'm a little bit more likely to at least believe some of it. But yeah, like if it's true that the nullifier is like what sunk his whole game because he was so focused on like I'm gonna make this big move. I'm gonna get rid of Mike. I want to know where the idols are so that I can nullify one, which would explain why he kept Mike in the game and gave back the idol as opposed to just voting out Mike. What like Drea wanted to. Then it's like. That's a huge part of the narrative and also like a huge part of the downfall. And I don't understand why it wasn't in the TV show. I
mean, the only thing that I can think is that it's inconsequential to the winner story. And I mean, in the end game right now, like that's what's getting the most focus. So they were able to create a mostly workable narrative without it. So the winner story taking precedence is the only thing I can think of. And if that's the case, I mean, that's probably encouraging for the person that I hope is the winner of this season.
I think that it could mean that Mike is the winner of this season.
It's entirely possible.
And this protects him a bit that like he wasn't, completely unaware of an impending danger the whole time that, because I'm sure, Omar talked about it a lot. Like you can just think about some of his interviews in this episode. It's like, they probably just cut right out. Like when he's like, oh, why he was so confident and why, the plan is foolproof. It's because he knows he can beat an idol. But, again, they screwed it up anyway. Like he didn't play in the Hellfire, but it's just like, okay, that's like just that it's one of the biggest revelations I've heard. And again, I know that the thing that we see is constructed narrative, but it's like, but there's a whole narrative around it. Like, I don't think it actually was inconsequential to the season, but as you say, it might be inconsequential to the final result of the season.
Right.
And they were still able to build Omar up, and they were still able to present something plausible for his downfall, something that, they have that moment that they were going to use anyway with Drea's exit. But it's like, yeah, actually, it wasn't really that. Again, if that's what turned Maryanne, but it's like, I think Mike turns Maryanne based on the information he gets about the nullifier. So,
yeah, and we don't obviously see necessarily him sharing that information with her, so we have no idea. Obviously, they didn't reference a nullifier at all, so they couldn't show him doing that. But I mean, it's possible that he even told her. We don't know. We have no idea.
Yeah, he could have been like, did he tell you that he had that? No, well, I guess you guys aren't so close after all.
Right.
He told Lindsay.
Yeah. So it's like, I prepared last night mentally about like discussing all the ways my guy Omar failed, but apparently I didn't see all the ways that he failed. Right. So like what we saw in the episode, like what I said earlier, and not an appropriate level of fear. I think a nullifier or not, I think we can fairly comfortably say, and I believe he's probably said it as well, he did not nurture the relationships as well as we thought he had been. Which isn't to say that that was an invention. He did a good job through portions of the season. But, when it's brass tacks time and all those people we thought that he was connected to more than enough, they all said yes pretty quickly to voting him out, Yeah.
Apparently, saving Maryanne, Romeo, and Mike didn't work out so well for him.
And in this very episode, he brings Maryanne, Romeo, and Mike on a reward with him. Like, he gets his first reward win, and he's like, I'm going to bring these people along, presumably thinking like, I'm going to cement some bonds here with these people, despite whatever justification he was giving publicly. Yep. He even says in the confessional, he's like, and, added bonus, like, Jonathan and Lindsay starving, not really the worst thing. So, yeah, he does this for those three, and then, of course, gets sent home immediately. So the lesson here, of course, is never do nice things.
Absolutely.
Yep.
But yeah, like, again, part of the really well constructed under the radar story is he fights to keep Maryanne in the game at the merge.
Yep.
And even earlier than that, it could have been Maryanne instead of Mariah, with the one vote that Taku went to. And his reasoning is like, I want to keep her around. I want to, so that, one day I could use that extra vote in an idol. Very fun that instead it was used to remove him from the game. And I think just a lesson though, besides yours, that might be the big lesson. And this applies, to Romeo especially, but Maryanne as well. Hey, here's something I was wrong about. Apparently he was expending too much game capital because he shouldn't have been saving these people at all. I think in this, maybe I'm saying this because it aligns to my worldview and desires as a viewer. I'll cop to that. You gotta get rid of more of those types early. I think, you just let them hang around long enough, and, he thought he was saving Romeo to be his goat, and he was nurturing that, and it's like, I have use for Romeo and not Roxroy, and at the time, I'm like, yes, that makes sense. At the time, I felt like it was probably about right time for, the bigger players to start turning on each other. But you just can't leave many of them, because Romeo did nothing for Omar at all. Omar did things for Romeo, not altruistically, obviously. It was all strategic and gameplay. But this is the moment now. This is the moment where Romeo could have been like, and I was, honestly, while watching the episode, I was hoping that, like, at Tribal Council, they would cut to a scene where Romeo comes up to Omar and is like, it's you. And then Lindsay hands him that idol, like, oh, okay.
Nope.
But no, he's just like, yeah, sure, I'll vote him out. It's like, what?
And again, did not take
so
a lot of
he should have just
persuading.
voted that guy out. It should have, would Drea vote out, Omar right now? Probably not. Should have sent Mike's ass home. So your lesson is the right one. Don't do nice things for anybody. But I think another lesson is recognize the threat that quote unquote goats play in this game. And it's not to beat you in the final three. It's to prevent you from getting to the final three. Because next week, Mike is immune, Maryanne is immune, and Romeo is functionally immune from all votes. Not a lot of spots left.
Nope. Yeah, and I think you kind of hit on it there, though, that when they go to recruit Romeo as a vote against Omar, despite, the fact that we've seen Omar say, like, oh, I'm the only one that has a working relationship with him. I'm basically the only one that talks to him. He had just taken him on a reward. All these things did not really seem, from the edited television product that we got, that Romeo was hesitating whatsoever regarding voting out Omar, because he has his own self-interests in the game, and they do not involve staying loyal to Omar. They merely involve Romeo getting further in the game, and this benefited that.
I guess, but here's the thing, like, wouldn't voting out Jonathan do the same for him? Because without Romeo, Omar doesn't go. Right? Like, Romeo ended up being the unknown swing vote and all of this. Like, if he had voted the way that Omar asked him to vote and got rid of Jonathan, the way he had previously agreed to in the episode, Romeo also would have stayed and, moved another day. So it's like, I'm just trying to figure out, like, was this the right move for Romeo? I think the correct answer is there is no right move for Romeo.
That's what I was going to say. It's like, who cares what the right move? Like, what is it? It doesn't matter ultimately. And I think, like, if you wanted to, attribute some rationale for him, I think given the options between taking out Omar or Jonathan, I get the sense, and obviously we have not had it like spelled out plainly for us, but I get the sense that people kind of can tell that Jonathan is maybe not going to be a big threat at Final Tribal Council. So not that Romeo has a chance at Final, but he might think that he does.
But he doesn't know that.
That's what I'm saying. And so thus, if he thinks that he has a chance at Final Tribal Council, he probably is then pitting himself against these other players and thinks, well, everyone likes Omar. Even I like Omar. Not everyone likes Jonathan. So maybe I'd rather keep Jonathan. So that could have just been the rationale. That could have been all it was.
It could have been that Maryanne was finally letting him be a player in a vote for the first time.
Could have been.
Ever. And that could have been like, okay, yeah, you're not just telling me what to do. Somebody who has not, either not been telling him what to, how to vote or been lying to him about who to vote. Maryanne's like, really now, like, this is it. And you're a key decision maker. That would make sense too. Just the one thing, if you're really judging, and obviously I'm incredibly biased. I wish he hadn't done it, but I am trying to really figure out what was best for Romeo, but the answer is nothing. What would have been best for Romeo is 10 moves ago doing a few things, right, and maybe, helping out around camp every once in a while. But it's like, the people that he aligned with, 2 of them voted for him. So, I don't think it was a bang-up move, right?
So
Jonathan, whom he did not vote out, was like, how about we just get rid of Romeo instead? Whereas Omar didn't even think of that. So, getting to the end might have been easier with Omar, except that the one prediction I'll be making for next week is Romeo Final 3. Lock it in.
Yeah, I feel like that one's pretty safe. Another person who's rationales could maybe be questions when it comes to voting. Lindsay was like laser focused on getting Jonathan out. And I think that seemed to me like what I'm taking away from that is that she is so focused on winning these challenges. And she even like spells out like, I'm the David and he's the Goliath. And like, wow, look at this. I took him out and blah, blah, blah. So I think she then sees this as like, well, this is the obvious next step in the narrative, right? Like I've defeated him in a challenge and now I will take him out and thus added benefit, probably make it easier for myself to win a next challenge. But really at this point, you've beaten him in a challenge. Tell the jury that if you're up against him in a final 3 and you'll get your credit. Like you beat him head to head. And I think,
but he beat her head to head last week.
Sure. But I think also like she even says in her confessional, she's like, look, I'm a tiny woman and I beat this big hulking man. Like you will get some credit for that. But at the same time, you're probably going to get credit for the fact that people like you more than Jonathan, like she has to recognize that she's had more friendships with the players in this game than Jonathan has, at least unless we've been presented something that's just wildly inaccurate. She has more bonds with other players in this game than Jonathan ever has.
Maybe. I mean, we did just see Mike go to the mat to protect Jonathan, so I think
that's Jonathan's one ally.
I think Rockshroy will vote for him. Like, I do think people are overselling how disliked Jonathan is. I don't think he's disliked at all by that group. I think he annoys them at times. I think he said a couple of terms that like set wild alarms off for people that listen to this podcast that I'm not confident did the same thing to the people who knew him on the island. I also don't think he's going to win. Just that's the way to say. But no, look, I think she's been laser focused on him to a fault for weeks now. But I think this episode, her reasoning was perfectly sound and accurate because it's not, I think, that she's afraid of going to the end against Jonathan. I think it's that she realizes only one of them is getting to the end because one of them is going to have to win a challenge at some point, and not having him there will make it easier for her. No, and if that challenge might even be fire making, but at some point, one of them is going to prevent the other from advancing. And as the numbers dwindle down here, it would be good for her if she could get rid of him. And then, because, who you can beat at the end is important, but as I hammered earlier in this episode, getting there is even more important. So don't think too many steps ahead and thus say, not play an idol that's expiring anyway to protect somebody who you thought was of value to you. Because frankly, I think whichever one of them loses, does not win immunity next week, is gone at 5.
Well, also, and this might speak to Lindsay's ability to read or to make reads. It was very funny that Lindsay and Jonathan have this whole conversation, right? Like they've lost the reward. And so it's just them having this conversation over rice where they're both clearly lying to each other, right? And you get the confessional of Jonathan and he's like, yeah, obviously we're lying to each other. She knows it. I know it. But then you cut to the Lindsay confessional and she's like, I totally fooled him. It's like, aw.
Yeah, no. And like, again, like the show constructed a really strong narrative of why these two people were blindsided and lost this week. But I don't know if it was the reality. Again, and I know it's never the reality, but the reason why Jonathan has a leg up on her and all that is because he knows about the idol nullifier and the knowledge that was shared. Like, that was his eye-opening moment. And, of course, that was all hidden from us.
Yep.
So, yeah. But, yeah, I agree. She is so focused, like, oh, yeah, I'm going to take him out, and he doesn't even know anything. And she's been wanting to do this for weeks now. And I think the big flaw there is she hasn't presented a strong argument to anyone else why Jonathan is a threat to them.
Right.
I think Jonathan is a threat to her for the reason I said, and that I think in order for her to advance, she's going to need to win challenges, and he is her biggest obstacle to do that. Can she beat him? Yes, but also he can beat her. It would be nice if there were fewer people who could beat her, which, other than this week's reward challenge, so far has presented every other person, that can't beat her or Jonathan. So, but everybody else is like, yeah, I don't care. I don't need to win challenges to get to the end. I don't care if I go against Jonathan in the finals. I'm not going to be staking my claim on a challenge-based thing like you are. So she hasn't done and maybe that argument isn't there, but she's all like, we have to. It's got to be obvious to everybody. We got to get rid of Jonathan because he can win these challenges. And I think everybody else is like, yeah, okay. Like, if it's not him, it's you. So it doesn't really matter. Like, nothing changes much for me here.
Exactly. But looking forward to next week. What are you hoping to see in next week's episode?
Canada to bring home the title once again.
2 in a row. It'd be exciting for you.
I always thought that if they ever let Canadians on the show, it's a wrap.
Oh, yeah.
Because, I mean, it's not that Canadians are so great. Is that we're superior to Americans is the thing. And in a social game, I think there's just something to it. It's like, oh, wow, you're just not at the underlying level of hostile that we're used to. What a delightful person you are. I want to share my secrets with you, and I want to share in your success. Like, I just thought that would be how it would go.
I mean, we had 2.5 Canadians on this season, right? All of them made it to post-merge.
Yeah.
All of them made it very deep into the post-merge even.
Yeah. I mean, the reason why I haven't been counting Drea is I don't know if she considers herself Canadian or an American expat, right? Like, she lives in Canada now, but she was born in America. But obviously, you can move to Canada and become a Canadian.
Right.
I just don't know if she feels herself.
She could be
like,
Canadian
if I move
by choice. That almost seems better.
Yeah, absolutely. If I hear that, then I welcome her to the tribe and, I become an even bigger fan. But like, if I moved to America, I would never consider myself American. It would just be the place I made my money, right? I would always be Canadian no matter what. If I, got citizenship, it would probably just be making like taxes and other things easier. But so I don't know where she's at.
Saying, because you don't love your socialist paradise.
Well, if I'm not living there, then how does that help my tax dollars? What, so I can help fund their non-existing military? Come on. And honestly, just so I wouldn't have to fill out a visa form every year, it'd probably be useful.
Yeah,
but anyway, so Team Canada all the way. And honestly, I hope she does something else, something more.
Yeah.
It'd be cool if the vote comes to her next week, which I think is in play. I think most likely the scenario is the loser of the challenge between Jonathan and Lindsay is going home.
Yeah.
If they both lose, I think it's Lindsay going home. But it'd be cool if, like, say Lindsay wins and everybody's else like, yeah, no, I don't want to vote out Jonathan. And then they decide to vote out Maryanne and bam, she saves herself and takes out, obviously not Mike, so I guess Jonathan.
See, I think the thing that would be more dramatic and even more of a resume builder for her is if, say, Lindsay and Jonathan inexplicably both lose that challenge, right? Let's say like Maryanne wins it, right? Because this then gets her some wiggle room, right? She can use this idol that no one knows about in a really fun way. So she can say like, oh yeah, we're gonna take out Lindsay, whatever, agree to this plan, and then save Lindsay, take out Jonathan or whoever her target. I assume it would have to be Jonathan or maybe Mike, I guess, but it's gonna be Jonathan, right? So then.
Well, Mike has an idol, so it's
right, exactly. So why? So anyway, then she takes out Jonathan, basically herself. I mean, probably another vote is on him from Lindsay, and then she can be like, "Yeah, that's right, that was me," going into Final Tribal Council, which would be impressive.
Yeah, that'd be cool. Or even the reverse. Like, again, I understand it would be more fun for us if it was Jonathan, but if I'm rooting for Maryanne, and I am Team Maryanne all the way, I would rather Lindsay be removed from the game because I think, she's the bigger threat to Maryanne. I now think Maryanne's the front runner. R.I.P. Maryanne now that I've said that. And it's not just the Canada thing. Like, I think there's just been a canny enough presence for her throughout the season. I was super impressed with what she did tonight. And, like, I did like her at the beginning of the season. It was like she was a really interesting presence. I just needed her to tone it down a bit.
Yeah.
Which has happened.
Yes.
It's actually, maybe this works really well. Come in really high so that when the deprivation gets you, you're still at a good level.
Yeah.
Whereas, like, somebody like Jonathan, we were enjoying at the beginning of the season, largely because he was dominating challenges, but there was also personality. And then when it got to him, it's like, oh, man, I don't like this dude at all. Right. So it's like, yeah, that's the lesson. Come in hot and then get to a good spot.
Yeah. you burn bright early, and then, just slowly fade. And, her version of slowly fading is she's still a shining star. Yeah, I am similarly in the bag for Maryanne. Like, I'm really hoping she pulls this out. I think she's got possibilities to do so. She's got avenues that she can take to get to that final tribal council. And, my worry is that she might struggle with the fire making. But in this very episode, I think they even showed her playing around with making the fire. And I was like, okay, that seems encouraging to those who are rooting for Maryanne to win this thing. So, if
I feel like her super fanness, which they've spotlighted throughout the season, has probably had her like working on fire throughout the season.
So this is the other thing, right? Like, if you're looking for something truly impressive that will carry her into final tribal council and hand her a win, Jonathan, say, wins the final immunity, which is not an insane prospect, right? Jonathan has already established that he is good at making fire, like takes pride in this, like thinks he's really great at it. If then, and this does again seem in Jonathan's wheelhouse, he says like, oh, I'm going to give up this immunity. I'm going to take someone out with fire. And for whatever reason, that person is Maryanne. I don't know why it would be, but let's say it is. Then she defeats him. Like, come on, that's a slam dunk then going into final tribal council.
Absolutely. I mean, that's not out of the realm. Maybe her, level. I mean, if you listen to people on the internet that want to say how wrong I am, that aren't me, who also wanted to say how wrong I was, well, the last thing people say is like the most important thing, right? Like, Omar went home because Drea said something. Well, this time Omar said something about Maryanne. So maybe she will become public enemy number one.
You never know.
But she has an idol.
Yep.
So go Maryanne!
Yeah, I mean, maybe, she saves herself with an idol and then going into Final Four. Jonathan's like, oh, I got to take her out because, she's had a solid last two tribal councils and then can't in the fire making. And then, just stomps all over that final tribal.
Yeah. I think now Lindsay isn't even my second rooting interest. Like, I'm so bummed with the way that they messed up that idol thing, which, of course, again, would be more just to preserve my number one rooting interest, but like it could work out. But here's the reason why: not only because of
she failed your boy.
It seemed like she did not want to take out Omar. I think now she's in so much danger. Whereas if Omar was in the game, she'd be in a little less danger, right? Like, if she had saved him, she wouldn't necessarily have to win at Final Five. Or if she did, it would be much easier because Jonathan would be out of the game. Although I guess that wouldn't have happened. Maryanne outmaneuvered that too.
Right.
So, yeah, but that was unbeknownst. That's, not in the fact, she can't factor that into her decision making. If she really wanted Omar there and Jonathan gone, she should have done it, and she didn't. So then I'm like, dead to me. Because that's how we front runners roll. Make one mistake, right. I'm out. Especially if it costs my main rooting interest.
Which it did. All right.
It did.
So that's...
She's not even Canadian.
Oh. So that's about enough for this episode. Let's do some plugs. First of all, you can find our content on purplerockpodcast.com. I want to give a quick shout out to my boy Saturday Night Palsy, who has a 50th birthday this week. Also, shout out to anybody else that's less important that had a birthday this week. I don't even know who they'd be, but if it was your birthday, happy birthday.
For SMP, you're one of the highlights of this community, and the community being one of the highlights of this experience. I say one of because clearly, like, the highlight of it is my takes, but like after that, it's like the commenters and like yourself.
Yeah, and I like all the commenters.
And then after that might be John's takes. Like, there's a hierarchy.
Anyway, our commenters are great. You can find them on purplerockpodcast.com. All wonderful, except for actually Saturday Night Palsy. Fuck that guy. Anyway, you can find our Twitter at Purple Rock Pod is the show. I'm Purple Rock John. Andy is, of course, Purple Rock Andy. And subscribe in all those places that you're supposed to do such a thing. What else you got for us, Andy?
Next week, the podcast will probably be like a day late or so. Finales tend to be long, so we want an extra day to be able to talk about it. That and Thursday is just not as workable for us. So look for that either either we post it like Friday night or Saturday morning. You'll have to listen to inferior Survivor podcasts in the interregnum to get your fix. And then I wanted to give a shout out as well to my favorite listener. Today, the day we are recording this, is our 18th wedding anniversary. That, of course, I'm speaking of my wife, not you. And
I thought it was ours.
That wasn't the hour.
Oh, Andy.
We've been married that long, which, when you do the math backwards, it's like, wow, we were really young when that happened. And at the time, it didn't feel like that. Now that I have older children, I'm like, wait, how would we feel if they got married that young? But at the same time, I can't exactly fault the decision-making of those young people, because it was undoubtedly the best decision I've made. Everything that's good in my life stems from it. So thank you for helping me make that decision. And thanks for listening to the podcast.
You're thanking me, I assume.
Absolutely.
Really?
I mean, we didn't know each other yet, but I just had a feeling.
I'm glad that
one
I could
day
be that influence on you.
There would be somebody who would help me talk about the show on a medium that I don't think existed yet.
Yeah. Also, I'm just really glad I could be here as you did things to help you get laid tonight. So, bravo.
Well, probably more of like, while people are listening to this, think about that. Put that in your head.
What a thought to leave the podcast on.
Oh, we had some theme music.